Welcome in to the Basketball by Association podcast. That's the one we do. Me being Arky, he being Joel. Hello, Joel.
I was slightly worried that perhaps you had forgotten the name of the show. I mean, it's been 8 days. We took yesterday off. So we're a little late to our normal schedule here, and I thought maybe you're a rhythm guy. Maybe you've been thrown off your rhythm, but you pulled through. And yeah, it's good to see your face again. It's good to talk some basketball. If for some odd reason you want to see our faces, I mean it's questionable. But if you want to see those, you can find us on YouTube. And, click the like, share, subscribe, all the buttons. I mean, basically just mash all the buttons on your keyboard. If you do that for us, something good probably will happen. We would like that. If you're more of a sane person and you don't want to see our faces, we're on the audio versions, iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, all those places you get podcasts and other audio things that you might listen to. I'm excited, Arky, Shea, because today is episode 72. And that means I had to pick somebody who wore jersey number 72 in the NBA, and there's only one choice for today, and it's not because there's only one logical choice. It's because there's literally only one choice of somebody that wore 72. But what's really fun about this is, unlike most of the other late 60s, early 70 numbers that we've had, which date back to like the 1940s and 50s and get real weird, although last week we got McCoy McLemore, who still is the coolest name of any sports player, probably of all time. I mean, I'm just going to go out and let him say that. But this guy wore number 72 in the years 2010 and 2011. So we're not talking an old school player here. And he did it. This is purely coincidence. He did it with the Philadelphia 76ers, who, if you're on the audio version, I'm wearing a Sixers shirt today. And I got an Allen Iverson jersey behind me. Those are pure coincidences. Do you want to take a guess at all? I mean, just a shot in the dark. We're talking over a decade ago now on the Sixers, but I mean, you being a Knicks fan would have seen plenty of Sixers, at least, being in the same division.
Oh,
in case I had to remind you.
I don't know. For 2 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
72 a decade ago.
The hint is the dude shot a ton of threes, and that was the only reason that he was in the NBA whatsoever.
I don't know.
All right. The guy, number 72, he did log 8 NBA seasons, technically 9, I guess.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
So
Jason Capono, who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I got to look at he was a first-round pick, I believe. I think a late first-round pick by the Cavs. Played time with Charlotte. That would have been the Bobcats still at that time. The Heat for a couple seasons, Raptors for a couple seasons, Lakers, and then retired, or Sixers for a couple seasons, and retired after the Lakers at the age of 30. But dude was a three-point machine in college. Never really translated to the NBA, but teams like to have shooters around. He was a 4-year guy out of UCLA. And no, he was actually drafted by the Cavs in the second round, 31st pick, so almost a late first rounder.
Was only able to keep 72 for 2 years. I mean, had to have
That's
72.
Right.
Couldn't. I mean, clearly wasn't drafted, and it was like, hey man, 72. Them's my digits. Give them to me. Again, we've had this discussion before. Someone good just needs to pick an oddball number and then just stylize the hell out of it, right?
Exactly. I mean, you've got the real estate, and you would think where players are so into the fashion scene and trying to stand out there, or James Harden with the beard, or Anthony Davis with the eyebrow, and picking all sorts of goofy things to be brandable, basically, because that's what it comes down to. You're absolutely right. You would think somebody would be like, yeah, I'm number 72, and this is the number, and no one's going to remember Jason Capono after this.
That's right.
But, we have seen a few oddball ones that did stick. Like Sean Bradley will forever be associated with 76 because he was drafted by the 76ers.
Wow, that is a month from now show preview, but okay.
And Luka Doncic, 77. I think he's got probably the inside track on the weird number thing at this point, because nobody else that's really that high profile went that far out on a limb. And 77 is a cool number. I mean, 7's a quarterback number in the NFL. That's one that everybody wants all the time. And I don't know. I agree. I think somebody should probably jump on that bandwagon and maybe have an outsized impact on a number. And who knows, maybe we'll see 25 years from now a bunch of players that still wear 77 because, hey, that was Luka's number and I grew up, watching Luka, or my dad really liked Luka and this is my number now.
No, I'm excited for like the newer numbers that sort of may come out as far as
like decimals or percentages or
that's right. I'm looking for fractions.
He's an advanced stats guy.
Yeah. This guy. Listen, I don't know why the NBA allowed him to do the Pythagorean theorem on the back of his jersey, but it's a players' league, so he gets to do whatever he wants.
This league is too math woke. They need to stop this.
Oh,
regular numbers only.
Can you imagine? Someone trying to say, like, where is the sanctity? First advertisements, now mathematical theorems.
I said imperial numbers only, damn it, not the metric system. Apologies for my curse words, but
that's right.
For emphasis only.
That's good. That's going to be the new, man, this league's just so political movement. It's going to be, man, this league is too much into the metric system, man. Come on. Freaking put if it's not a yard measurement, then I don't want it on my jerseys or on my players. It's my sport.
Get off my yard.
That's.
Let's move on. It's time to talk some basketball.
Joe, I don't even want to after that. I don't even want to. You just killed it there. A few things have happened since we spoke. A couple of older, a couple of new. I want to get to the newer things first because they're newer. Because I think they're kind of really, really interesting. Like Rajon Rondo is going to be on another team. Rajon Rondo is being traded by the Clippers along with Patrick Beverley, and they're going to Memphis for Eric Bledsoe.
Way to just do Daniel Oturu like that as if he doesn't exist and wasn't part of the deal.
My fault.
Man, come on, man.
Daniel Oturu, as well as Rajon Rondo and Patrick Beverley. By the way, Patrick Beverley is the same guy that said, hey, Steph Curry, you've had the last 5 years. The next 5 years are mine or something like that. Well, I mean, it could be in Memphis, technically. So Eric Bledsoe was what the Clippers give back. So discuss with me, Joel, your thoughts on this movement, sending Patrick Beverley and sending Rajon Rondo and David Oturu and getting Eric Bledsoe back. And what do you think that does for the Clippers?
Well, first we'll talk about the Grizzlies. I'm just going to go off script here.
Wow. Just don't even answer my question.
Because there's a tie-in. There's a tie-in to Bledsoe beyond just the trade, obviously. Eric Bledsoe was never going to stick in Memphis. When he got moved as part of that deal earlier in the offseason, there was no way he was going to stick with Memphis, even though they are the type of team that, they could probably use another veteran or two. It's a young, upcoming team, but you kind of feel like they probably have that already with Steven Adams and Kyle Anderson. Maybe one of Patrick Beverley or Rajon Rondo sticks around if the Grizzlies, and my bet would be on Beverley because they're a defensive-oriented team and Beverly's a defensive-oriented guy. As long as those guys are clear and going to be comfortable backing up Ja Morant, who's going to get as many minutes as he can handle at the point guard spot. And remember that Memphis also has Tyus Jones, who's been a more than serviceable backup point guard and is another young guy. So whoever sticks in that third point guard slot is fighting not for a starting role. They're fighting for a backup spot and minutes at all. There's no way that Rondo and Beverly stick in Memphis. Somebody's going to get bought out or moved in another deal. This is really just the Grizzlies being the middleman and willing to solve this problem for other teams and find that home. And I actually texted you when you told me about this deal. I said, it's kind of sad for Rondo that he's at this point in his career where the dude's going to get traded like every 6 to 8 months. Like, it's the tail end of his career. He can still get on the floor and do a few good things, but the amount of time that he can do that for is lessening. He's still incredibly smart, so teams are going to want that. But he also has that checkered past of, at times, being a phenomenal teammate and mentor. You think about the last couple of years, he's done really well in that role. And that started in Sacramento, actually, with DeMarcus Cousins. But he still has the checkered part where he was an absolute nightmare when he got traded from the Celtics to the Mavericks, and then did a forgettable stint in Indiana as well. And so there are certain teams, I would think, that maybe steer clear of him because there's always still that question of which Rondo are you going to get? Is something going to set him off where now he just doesn't like the situation and he tanks things? Patrick Beverley's been a combustible guy too, but a little bit more so against the opponents, not towards his own team. So again, my money is that Beverley stays in Memphis. Rondo moves on. Oturu, who was a rookie last year, probably gets a look in training camp, gets a look here in Summer League. They're pretty deep up front. I mean, Memphis is really deep actually at every position with a lot of young guys who can play. So it's going to be a lot of competition on that roster, and it is possible that none of these three guys who are part of this trade actually wind up sticking, and that the Grizzlies just cycle through to try to get some lower assets for it. So now on to your question, Eric Bledsoe. I don't mind this at all. Eric Bledsoe has been forgettable in Milwaukee. He's been forgettable in New Orleans. Last year in New Orleans, they tried to make him a shooting guard, and he was all right at that, but his shooting percentages have just been going down year after year after year. But he still is athletic. He still can defend. He still can get out on the fast break. There still is this idea that he's searching for the right spot, the right system, and that perhaps the shooting can come back a little bit if the comfort level is up. I feel like the Clippers, consolidated a couple of guys who, yeah, they could play, but you didn't need both of them in Beverley and Rondo. And so you got a more talented player, an athletic player than either of those two at this point, and somebody that you're not going to ask to do too much. Because remember, Reggie Jackson has basically won the starting point guard role after he was the third string guy. He's the one they're going to go with forward. Paul George is going to eat up the shooting guard minutes. You've got Luke Kennard in that mix. You've got Terrence Mann in that mix. And then it's Bledsoe in there as well, along with Jay Scrubb, who got a few minutes and did not play like his name. So he showed he could do something. I think that type of role for Bledsoe, where he's a backup and he's an icing on the cake type of guy instead of a starter that you're really relying on, might lead to some resurrection moments for him where we remember, oh yeah, Bledsoe's pretty good. But when he was in big playoff moments or he was having to be the third best guy on a Bucks team, he showed he was overmatched. Final thought is Bledsoe's best years came in a Clippers uniform at the very beginning of his career. It's been a long time since that, but you have to imagine there's the hope that getting him back home, quote unquote, kind of re-energizes him.
I do agree with that sentiment. I also think that it's interesting that I think the fact that Bledsoe came for three pieces, and you laid it out perfectly, that I think Memphis got themselves a few assets to play around with and to make other moves with. That this wasn't just, we think Rajon's going to be able to lead or to be able to help with Ja or anything like that. Like it was going to be, or not going to be. It looks like it's going to be the continuation of some more offseason movement for Memphis. And
right, because remember, Tyus Jones takes ball handling duties and Kyle Anderson takes ball handling duties from the forward spot also.
That's true. And I think those are pretty good pieces to be able to play with. Like, so I want to speak specifically to Rajon Rondo for a moment, because I love Rajon Rondo, right? Like
me too. I've been a big fan.
Rajon Rondo had like a stretch from like their championship year in Boston or like from there until like 3 years ago, to where like that guy was moved a lot, but was money from the point guard spot. He didn't score a bunch, but like his assist numbers were just crazy stupid.
And fun assists too. I mean, truly smart assists. His on-off numbers were never great, but one of my favorite players to watch because of the cerebral approach to angles. I've always said, like, Rondo's approach to angles with passing was the same way that Steve Nash's approach to angles for driving. Like, you almost couldn't quantify the genius behind what they would see to get to those spots. It truly was a gift. And that's That's why you watch professionals, because you go, I could never do that. I couldn't even see that.
Right.
You know?
Right. And like he was such a machine when it came to like that specific part of his game, right? But I do think that there is an interesting thing with Rajon now going as far as where he fits, not just on any other team, but in terms of today's point guards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what you would want to and expect to get in. Again, the guy's been in the league since like 2006 or 7 or something like that. He's had a run of it, so I don't feel completely awestruck by the end of his career. He's had a long time to be really fruitful. But I wanted to sort of mention that as much as I love him and you love him too, this is just since his 2014 season. All right. These are the spots he's been. Okay. So 2013-14 was his last year in Boston. Then he goes, 2014-15 is his last year in Boston. Then into Dallas, that same year trade. Sacramento the next year. Chicago the next year. The Pelicans the next year. The Lakers for 2 seasons. Atlanta and the Clippers this year. He had 9 seasons in Boston, and since then it has been, like you say, like every 6 or 8 months he's on a new team, like someone's finding him a piece, and I feel like I don't know, like I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like he would fit somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure where he fits. You know what I mean? Like the numbers are still pretty good. Like I think he played more in LA than he did in Atlanta. His numbers were a little bit up from there, points wise, definitely points wise and assists wise. So he still has gas in the tank as far as being able to perform. But as much as I say that, I think it's my love speaking for him than his abilities to sort of naturally fit. Now he's also, like you alluded to before, he's a bit of an abrasive personality, right? Like you got to find a locker room that sort of he can fit with, and I mean he's running out of them clearly, like that, out of locker rooms that he's going to get a chance in.
He's also at that point in his career, unless he wants to take the Vince Carter role and just play for as long as he can play, and it doesn't really matter what team he's on. He's fine to be the mentor and the old head out of that group, and there's no shame in that. Like that is a very honorable role, and you earn yourself years in the league. You know, you think of Udonis Haslem, who we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. You earn yourself extra run in the league by being willing to be that guy. But unless he's willing to do that, if he's now is saying, hey, I want another championship, I want to glob on, that narrows the field down of possible choices immensely, because, yeah, it's got to be the right fit. It's got to be a team that actually could use him for some point guard minutes and that has the right kind of weapons who will make up for his lack of shooting ability. Although I will say this, playoff Rondo has become a hashtag for the last few years, because the dude will hit some big threes in playoff games and is pretty good for like at least one game per series where he's going to give you 18 points and nail a couple of threes out of nowhere. So he can bring that. But
right, where do you put that on a team, though? You know what I mean? Like for the rest of the season, you know, it's just.
I've got two and a half choices where I think he could fit. One of which I absolutely love. The others, we'll see. We'll see what you think about these. The half one is Milwaukee. Just because Milwaukee, in backing up Drew Holiday, went with Jeff Teague last year, which I cannot believe they got away with that. Part of it was Dante DiVincenzo handled some of the ball handling duties and then was hurt during the playoffs, so we saw a lot more of Jeff Teague than probably anticipated. The Bucks just went out and they reacquired George Hill, who had played some minutes with Milwaukee, but I think Hill is over the hill. There was no other way for me to say that.
Joe.
Like I would personally, I would rather have Rondo backing up Holiday than either Teague or Hill at this point. However, Milwaukee's roster, they've got shooting, but Giannis has to have the ball so much. I don't know if the spacing works with that. I'm not a huge fan. The one I like a little bit better is Miami, just because Miami loves to get those veteran players and those, you know, win at all costs guys. And Rondo has shown that more often than not, he can be that. There would also be, of course, lots and lots of irony thinking back to Rondo from the Celtics and all those battles they had against the Heatles. But I mean, Rondo didn't care. He went to the Lakers, you know, he did that stint. He got a ring. So I would like him in Miami, where right now it's just Gabe Vincent backing up Kyle Lowry. Then again, Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo, if the latter is healthy, they would take some of the ball handling duties. Jimmy Butler handles ball handling duties, and Bam Adebayo does as well. So they're not short on guys who have the ball, and they may not be structured because it's so egalitarian. They may not be structured to have a guy like Rondo where it's like, no, one guy really has the ball all the time. It's Rondo, and he's going to deliver it to you. So I like Miami better than Milwaukee, but not all that much. The one I love, and this would have to be a buyout situation because I don't think they have the flexibility to get him. But you talk about having the weapons and the cerebral guys who would be willing to move, and Rondo gets them the ball to just let it fly. And truth be told, they could probably use another backup point guard option, is the Golden State Warriors. Because you throw Steph and, Clay, if healthy, and now you've got Bielitsa there, and Otto Porter can shoot a little bit. Andrew Wiggins, Michael Mulder is a flamethrower from downtown. You've got a lot of cutters in Wiseman. Draymond Green can cut. Iguodala is there now again. I don't know how much he'll actually play, but Damian Lee can do some of that. There's just a lot of different weapons there that don't necessarily mind receiving the ball to get their points. They don't have to have it in their hands, so often, with the exception of Steph Curry. But you think of how often Steph Curry runs off screens and pin downs, it's almost equal to what Clay does. So right now, behind Steph Curry, you've got Michael Mulder, and this is on the NBC Sports Edge depth chart. So a lot can happen here during the offseason. Michael Mulder, Gary Payton II, who's in Summer League for them, and Chris Chiozza, who's done some backup minutes with the Brooklyn Nets in a couple of different stints. I personally would like to ditch one or two of those young guys and get Rondo into that mix as an insurance option and see if Mulder or whoever is the best one coming out of camp can win that backup spot. But to me, that is where you go, Rajon Rondo. If you want to still hunt the ring, be on a good team, probably get the minutes. You're in the same division as the Clippers, so you get to stick it to them a little bit. It makes too much sense.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a team that you mentioned there I like more than you like, but you like it, so that's why you mentioned it's one of the three. And I'm just gonna go ahead and transition to the next story. I will circle back to this and connect the two in just a moment, but it does feel pertinent now that we're talking about them. Is that the Miami Heat now have a brand new old player who's been there the whole time, and Udonis Haslem, who signed a 1-year deal to stay with Miami Heat. His 19th season, Joel, in the NBA, all with the Miami Heat, Mr. Joel C. Cordes. And this is a guy who played 3 minutes last season, 5 games in the last 2 seasons. But he is a locker room type of guy that Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra really, really, really like. Udonis Haslem, Miami native, went to Florida. He's staying with the Miami Heat, and he's just never going to leave the state. Must be something about them income taxes, huh?
Here's how old Udonis Haslem is in 2 parts. I began covering the NBA as a locker room reporter. I had my own NBA show, actually sports show, and we did some NBA stuff with it. And we had credentials with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I was a junior in college when I began that in the 2003-2004 season. And I interviewed rookie Udonis Haslem back during that season. I worked for Bleacher Report in their NBA department for the better part of 7 years. And I covered a couple of playoff series, actually a few more than a couple, a handful and a half of playoff series for Bleacher Report in the upper Midwest here. If it was the Pacers, the Bucks, the Cavs, those teams that had playoff series, the Bulls. I covered the Heat when they were against the Bucks and the Bulls. So I was there for the Nazr Muhammad hockey check on LeBron James. And I believe that was in 2012. and Udonis Haslem was there and already was one of the older players. And Udonis Haslem was only halfway through his career at that point. So that's how old Udonis Haslem is. And yeah, it's like I said with Vince Carter. There is something really honorable about being willing to be that guy, to just be the sage in the locker room, to work really hard in practice. Look, if Udonis Haslem couldn't play at all, the Heat would just make him an assistant head coach, because that's where he's trending to, or they would put him in the scouting department and or the player development department. He would be there in the organization, but he obviously brings enough value in practice as a practice player that they're willing to keep using a roster spot on him rather than bringing some young guy in out of the G League.
Yeah, he's the 14th guy on the roster now.
Right. Or somebody else, that's another veteran that they're going to give a look. They're comfortable enough with that to keep doing that. And he is comfortable enough to know, look, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be in practice. I'm going to do my thing. And yes, it has been 5 seasons now since he's appeared in more than 20 games. In 2016-17, he appeared in 17 games. In 17-18, it was 14 games. 2018-19 was 10 games. 2019, 24 games. And like you said, last year he appeared in 1 game for 3 minutes. I believe it was the final game of the season.
It was it was it was the game against Philly.
Okay.
Maybe it might have been the last game. Whatever. It's like it was the middle of May or something. I can't remember the timeline of when the season actually technically stopped. But Miami led by like 20 or something at the end of the first quarter. He goes in, scores, by the way.
Yep.
Scores, gets tossed from the game for jaw jacking.
I did not know that. I love that. And here's another story. When Kevin Garnett came back to the Minnesota Timberwolves for his final stint right before he retired, I was so geeked, and my buddy who's a Timberwolves fan was so geeked because we grew up watching Garnett. I covered Garnett. Garnett was my basketball childhood, and my 2 older boys were old enough that they kind of knew who he was, especially my oldest son. They were really excited. I've got a Garnett poster and a couple of jerseys down in the basement here, and so they were excited. I just thought it was so cool that I would be able to take my kids to go see a Minnesota Timberwolves game at Target Center to see the player that I grew up watching, and now they would get a chance to see him in a Timberwolves uniform again, something I had never expected. So I took them to his second game back. There was no way I could get to the first one. It was way too expensive. I couldn't get there, but I got to his second game ever back, and it was against the Memphis Grizzlies. And stupid Kevin Garnett lasted a quarter and a half before he got himself ejected for jaw jacking. And so me and my kids and my buddy, this huge buildup, we got approximately 9 minutes of playing time of Kevin Garnett. And then I didn't get to go to another game that season because things, fell apart and he was done with the Wolves by the time it was over. It was...
Oh, that's the best and worst.
Yeah. He left me with an indelible memory. I will never forget watching him getting the second technical, and I'm just up there going, no, stop, don't do that. Come on, Kevin, don't do it.
Get me to halftime. Come on.
Right.
At least get me to the halftime entertainment. Come on, buddy. Okay. Just a couple more things on Udonis Haslem being old. I like this. This is where you and I get to interact some more on this. So when he played last year, he was 2.5 years older than the second oldest player in the NBA to have played. Would you like to take a guess at who he was old? Who was the second oldest player in the NBA that played last year was?
That played last year. Vince is out. Mm-hmm. And Jared Dudley's not that old. I don't know.
Anderson Varejao.
Oh, yeah. And see, that hardly counts, too, because Varejao wasn't even on an NBA roster till like the last 10 days of the season. I would not have thought of him at all. That was another one where, hey, come on back, we'll retire your jersey. And, oh, by the way, since we suck, we don't have to sign you to a one-day contract. We'll give you a couple of minutes of playing time because maybe you'll sell a couple extra tickets for Cavs fans for any reason to show up to their games.
Sure, like, oh, that's right. Oh, Anderson might be okay. All right.
Let me
Oh,
bust out my
really?
Anderson Varejao jersey.
So he is the 11th oldest player to appear in an NBA game ever, and if he plays after November the 8th, anytime, he will pass Charles Jones. What's his name? John Stockton, Herb Williams, and Bob Cousy. So he would become.
I mean, those are some names, right?
The only players that are be older than him to have played would be Nat Hickey, Kevin Willis, Robert Parrish, Vince, Dikembe, and Kareem.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing to interact, and then we'll move on to the next part of this. He could become the fifth player, will become the fifth player to spend an entire career of at least 19 seasons with just one franchise. Could you name the other four? At least 19 seasons of play, all with one franchise.
Well, Stockton's got to be on that list.
John Stockton is on that list, 19 with Utah.
Tim Duncan, right?
19 with the Spurs. So you're missing just two.
Did Dirk play that long? I don't think he was 19 years, was he?
Dirk was not 19 years. He was 21 years.
Oh, all right. So he's on that list too.
And the, excuse me, one more. You're doing great at this.
Is it Kobe Jellybean Bryant?
Kobe Jellybean Bryant is the fourth with 20 years of the LA Lakers. Now, I'm adding this also on to the talk because I think because of that, the way that locker room is constituted and the type of guys that Miami has just wanted over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
You put a Rajon Rondo on that team in that locker room, like the team that you said you like but didn't quite, sort of fully endorse love, but you did sort of like. I think that's a perfect spot. I think Miami works best for him and for that team. Now, Golden State would be a pretty interesting place. I think you're right. I think he could get a bunch of minutes there at Golden State. But as far as like the attempt to chase the championship and be able to get to play a bunch and the fit that the locker room would be,
I think locker room fit in Miami is great. I don't disagree with that at all. I just don't know if the on-court fit is as much because the ball moves so much and they don't really operate with that primary ball handler,
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to play more and you go to Golden State, like you have a better opportunity to play at Golden State. But if you want to be that mentor like Udonis for like $2.5 million, which is what he's getting, like just to basically be a good agitator on the court whenever you do get on the court. Because Rajon, it's one of the things I loved about Rajon Rondo, man. Dude he was not one of the guys that like wanted to dap it up after the game or in the middle of the game. Like that's what I loved about it because you're like sports, man. I don't want you to like the other guy. Like for this 48 minutes, just pretend you don't like each other and want to win.
Yeah, I mean, I totally can see it. I think those are the best two. One quick Udonis question before we move on: is it pretty much inevitable that Haslam gets his jersey retired in Miami as one of those rare like role player guys? Some of the franchises have one or two of those hanging around where he was just there for so long or he was a really key role player at a really key time and so everybody loved him and he maybe had that outsized impact. But Udonis has both in a lot of ways, and the way Miami has treated him, and especially because he's a Miami guy, I mean, he grew up in that area, went to high school in that area. It's almost inevitable, right?
I don't think there's a no in this, right? So Miami's not a team that has a ton of sort of like history, as far as like championship history.
That's another great point. Yeah.
And a ton of banners. And for a dude that's been with you for 2 decades and you want to keep him around so long, you never traded him. You never sort of let him go. You kept him around even though he's playing like, again, 2.5 minutes last season.
He's been to 3 different sets of finals. He's got a couple rings, 3 different sets of finals with 3 different eras of teams.
And that's what I was going to say. I was going to mention he's also been on the championship teams most recently that we're talking about. Like this, we always talk about how it's Bosh and Wade and LeBron, and rightfully so. But like Udonis is on those teams,
and played very meaningful minutes too.
So here's who Miami has retired the jerseys of. Only six, by the way, which means there's room in the rafters. Well, I guess these are the jersey numbers too. Dwayne Wade's 3.
Yep.
Alonzo's 33.
Yep.
Tim Hardaway's 10. Chris Bosh 1. Jersey number 23 by Michael, and 32 by Shaq.
And if Glenn Rice had played there longer, they might have retired his too. But yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. I can't see how he's not retired, and his name is up in the rafters like the minute he hangs it up.
Yeah, I mean,
you could pretty much take off his game jersey and just go hang it in the rafters because it's going to be dry, right? There ain't going to be any sweat on it.
I mean, he's not going to need another jersey. Like, he'd wear his road jersey in the game because he's not going to get into the game. Okay. Interesting things have happened with certain players, like Dennis Schroeder, who made a bet on himself. Joel C. Cordes, he bet on him. The Lakers offered him a massive deal, 4-year deal, turned it down. Was 4 years, 88 million. And no one else wanted to give him that kind of money. Free agency really started to fall all of a sudden at once. Trade signings happened. And now he's going to go to Boston for like $6 million on a prove-it year. Joel, this is the epitome of prove it, right? Like he bet on himself. He didn't quite get what he thought
That's an understatement.
I mean, the Lakers, okay, whatever. We'll get to that in a second. The Lakers were about to make him generationally wealthy, right? Beyond the taxes and everything. And he said, no, I think I can get more. And he goes out on his own, and the market wasn't what he thought it would be. So now he goes to Boston, a place that could use someone like him, and he's going to be super motivated this year, and then he's going to have a pretty decent roster beside him. So, thoughts on the fallout from Dennis Schroeder and the nearly $100 million contract that never was?
Yeah, so every couple of years, there's a cautionary tale like this, and sometimes it's a tragic cautionary tale. You think of like DeMarcus Cousins or Isaiah Thomas, where they were right about to get to that big contract and then got hurt, and they miss out on all that money and get stuck in prove-it deals and bad health, and the opportunity was just taken away from them. For other guys, it's the self-inflicted one of overconfidence, where you think of like Nerlens Noel a couple years ago. He had that huge offer to be able to stay, I think it was in Oklahoma City, and chose not to take the money, and instead has been bouncing around the league and has become a credible backup, but not not generationally wealthy, like you had said. And everybody who was offering that contract probably breathed a sigh of relief that he didn't take it. Dennis Schroeder, this unfortunately is like par for the course with him, because when he came in with the Atlanta Hawks, he graded on people very quickly about being irrationally overconfident. Like, there's that difference between, hey, this guy's really confident, he wants the last shot, he wants the starting spot, he's working for it, whatever, and that guy where it's just kind of obnoxious. And I recall stories about when he was on the Hawks of him rubbing the veterans there the wrong way. You know, Jeff Teague and Kyle Korver, Al Horford, Paul Millsap, those guys, they were not Dennis Schroeder fans. And Schroeder has bounced around since Atlanta. And remember, he was given the keys to the car eventually with the Hawks.
Yeah,
he was made the starting point guard, and they moved on from Jeff Teague, and the team was in decline, and eventually the Hawks parted ways. And since then, he's had a stint in Oklahoma City. He obviously played for the Lakers. I'm probably forgetting at least one other spot that he's been. And the fact that he hasn't latched on, and the fact that somebody was willing to offer him that big enough deal that the Lakers were, even despite the rumors that they didn't really want him. I think they offered him a deal they knew he wouldn't take. They did not want him to return.
Interesting.
You
think the Lakers lowballed him? So it was 4 years, $84 million. By the way, was the number, and
which is not an actual lowball for who Dennis Schroeder is.
Well, I was going to say, like he thought he was worth over $100 million for the contract, but you're talking about $21 million a year for Dennis Schroeder to be possibly the starting point guard alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis and now Russell Westbrook. Like, it's a lot to say no to. I mean, it's a lot to say no to.
It is. And so for him not to take that money when I don't think, and obviously no other team was willing to offer him more, but I don't think any other team would have been in that ballpark even. And I think the Lakers knew that. And I think they knew he wanted that $100 million. And they're like, look, if somebody is stupid enough to pay Dennis Schroeder $100 million, it's not going to be us.
When I saw the number reported that it was that close to $100 million, it was like $84 million, I thought, that are we talking the same Dennis Schroeder? Like, is there a different, the one that played for Oklahoma City, like that Dennis Schroeder? That's the guy that,
right, who brings you some value. He's fast. He can get to the lane. Yeah,
I don't mean to say like he's a bad player at all. I'm just saying, $21 million a year, excuse me, for that guy to be playing for that franchise. Like, this isn't just $21 million. Sorry about this. What's about to happen? Being thrown away for the Timberwolves or something, right? Like, you're playing for a championship presumptively next year to be given that much money, or at least, I mean, if the Lakers were willing to say that, throw that out there, what if they played the gamble and he said yes, were they going to be happy with the fact that they just paid $21 million a year for 4 years for this guy?
It means they don't probably bring in Kendrick Nunn for sure. It means that the Westbrook deal may or may not actually have happened. I don't know if they would have been happy with it. And there were the reports that people were unhappy with him at the end of last season. Now, again, the Lakers flamed out in the playoffs and probably nobody was happy with each other. That's just the way it goes. And on LeBron teams, there's always, there's a long track record on LeBron teams that when they don't do well, all of a sudden, all these stories start leaking about the role players. And there's always been insinuations that LeBron kind of deflects some of the heat off of him onto the other guys who didn't hold up. A lot of that is apocryphal. We'll never know if it's actually true or not, but that has gone with LeBron ever since his early Cavs days. So I don't think the Lakers actually wanted him to take that deal. I think they knew that he wouldn't take it. Dennis Schroeder, for all of the good things that he does, and he can shoot a little bit. He's not a terrible defender. He is a creative passer at times. He can get into the lane. He's got a little bit of Rajon Rondo in him in some ways. But for all those good things that he does, let's be real here. Dennis Schroeder is a replacement level starting point guard in the NBA, and a guy who's been too young and too high strung up to this point in his career to healthily accept a backup role, which narrows greatly the number of teams that are interested. And now he's getting to that age where the upside moniker goes away. And you look at him and go, he probably is what he is, which is a guy who is not going to make an all-star game, probably, at this point in his career.
Probably
and
ever, yeah.
Yeah, if he does, it's going to be once. It's going to be one magical season, or maybe the field was kind of weak.
And probably as a replacement player or something, right? Like, someone's going to drop out and Schroeder's just going to have some of the votes, and right, he's going to be a coach's designation.
Yeah, he's 27 years old. So he's entering his prime, but prime Schroeder is probably what you're going to get right now. And that could be a starting point guard on a championship team for the right dollar amount and in the right headspace. But there aren't a lot of teams out there that need a starting point guard and are actually decent. The teams that need starting point guards are bad, and they don't necessarily want to bring in a 27-year-old when you're drafting for those positions right now. And a guy who has not played nice when he has been a backup. Like, it's just the way it is. So Dennis Schroeder, unfortunately, like, the baggage that has gone along with him is self-inflicted, not only in this decision, but in the fact that there probably was a much smaller list of teams that were actually interested in him than he probably thought. And you never know, was his agent way off on this too, and he got bad advice from his agent or his camp? Or were they trying to talk him out of it? You're saying, hey, take the money. This would be a good idea. And no, I want to bet on myself. I want to bet on myself. And we always laud the guys where it paid off. We're like, oh, yeah, so-and-so, Pascal Siakam bet on himself and got that huge contract. Good for him. And that's true. Like, there takes a risk. But that risk is not without pitfalls. And it happens every few years where somebody gets burned badly. And for the rest of their lives, they're going to think about that big check that was right in front of them and dream about if I had only signed it.
Well, let's think. We're only a few years removed from the fact that he went 18-6, 19-6, and 2 years ago he was 19-5, point to points and assists.
But even still, that's still just replacement starter level.
What I'm saying is like this. These aren't superstar numbers; they're good numbers. That $88 million you should have run to the bank with and said, okay, yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and cash that check right now.
Let me get a good investment guy, and let me remember that I'm playing in Los Angeles, where if I win a championship, I will have the opportunity for the endorsements, and I'm going to have the endorsement opportunities even if I don't win a championship. Like,
think about the endorsement that you're going to have in Germany, where he's from. Like,
right.
Come on, man. Like, it's... Yeah.
So
he's going to get another contract offer after this season, and unless he goes for like 28-10, like it's not going to be $88 million. Like this was the one shot.
And Boston once again, man, did we spend so much time on them the last couple of years? Once again, has way too many interchangeable guards to actually play, and really looks like it could be a dysfunctional team again with too many guys and not enough roles for them, and a lot of like hunting and searching about who's going to fit into what. That is not a good situation to throw Dennis Schroeder into that mix when it's a guy who's just playing as a mercenary to get to his contract. You're like, we like to speak laudingly of irrational confidence, guys, but that's when we're focusing on the confidence. Sometimes if you focus on the irrational, you go, oh, wait, maybe this isn't such a good thing.
Yeah, so Boston's going to be a show to watch this year to sort of pay attention to how that goes. And you're only what's the name of the new coach that he's hired in Boston? I forget, whatever. You're only...
It wasn't Vanderpool.
Right. Your only possible respite from this is that he's just going to try to do everything he can by the book, but play out of his mind.
Ime Udoka, that's who it is.
Ime Udoka, yeah. So you try to play out of your mind. You play well enough within the team, but you put up some numbers. Say, hey, listen, my numbers aren't going anywhere. You can come back, get me. So my bad about the $100 million. Let's just call it 70 and we'll just call it 9 or something. Like that's your only respite, is that he's going to try to be on his P's and Q's because he has this is now his investment year. This is the year where he's got to go from $6 million to somewhere hopefully back over 50 or 60 million at least next offseason.
For those of you watching on YouTube here, I'm holding up both hands because I'm going to start a countdown. Here are the number of guys at the point guard and or shooting guard spot on the Boston Celtics depth chart who probably deserve and expect some minutes next year. Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder, Peyton Pritchard, Tremont Waters, Carson Edwards, Josh Richardson, Chris Dunn, Aaron Nesmith, Romeo Langford. If you're keeping score at home and you don't have the visual here, I'm holding up 9 of my 10 fingers. Now, yes, some of these guys could get moved and thinned out, and you get the roster looking a little better.
You have to, right?
And yes, Josh Richardson, Chris Dunn, and Aaron Nesmith all could maybe log you some minutes at the small forward spot because remember, we're in a position fluid era now in the NBA. So it may not look quite as bad as it looks. But the really frustrating part about this is it feels like the Celtics have been doing this now for the last 6 years, where they're burning roster spots in one area of overstocking or two, and then another area of the roster is just woefully understaffed. And that was a Danny Ainge problem. Now it's a Brad Stevens thing, and you hope that he's got an offseason to work with, but he's got to fix this because This is not a recipe for success right now.
There are at least 4 of those guys that aren't going to be on that team this year. I feel pretty confident in saying that. I feel pretty confident in saying that.
But will Brad just trade them for centers, and then you've got 7 centers on the roster, which was also a Danny Ainge problem.
Well, that's what you do. You just go to the next position. Like, what haven't we been heavy on lately? Oh, big guys who can't play. Clydesdales. Okay, big old Clydesdale. Is there a chance we can get Aaron Baines back? Is that possible? We're looking for big, heavy dudes. Okay, final story I wanted to get to is Kawhi Leonard, who was thought to be possibly on a stay healthy kind of sort of prove it deal, is not, in fact. He is signed for a 4-year max deal. It's only worth $176.3 million, which is like, livable. Like
it's 2.2 times what Dennis Schroeder was going to be signing for.
Boy, it's such. That Schroeder story is such a great story. Like you bet on yourself, but like
you played yourself.
You gotta kind of know like where you're at, right? Like who was talking to him, being like, "Dude, 88's not enough. You're at least 12 more million," and you're like, 12 might be fine. I don't know where I'm getting 12 more million. Anyway, so it's a 4-year deal, player option for the 4th deal for Kawhi Leonard. So as someone who is we talked about a bit of a mercenary himself the last couple of seasons or so, or for a couple of teams now. He's now dug in with the Clippers for a few more seasons, and now we look for a guy to recover and possibly be a force for this team late in the season next year, and possibly make that playoff run with a healthier Kawhi.
If Kawhi wanted to stay and wasn't a huge problem, which both of those things seem to be true. Seemed he wanted to stay well enough, was just maybe testing the market and wanted to take some meetings. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. And he hasn't been like a locker room problem. He's just kind of been the enigmatic Kawhi Leonard that you knew you were getting that when you brought him aboard. But if he wants to stay, I think you've hitched your wagon to Kawhi Leonard, and so you give him that contract because when healthy, he is one of the most disruptive in a good way players in the entire league. He is an MVP candidate. You are absolutely rolling the dice on the enigma side of things, and health is the bigger issue because these nagging injuries. But if him and Paul George are getting along well enough, which in year 2, they seem to get along a lot better than year 1. Remember, the Clippers were really, really good last year, and you can build on that. They seem to respond to Ty Lue. They won a couple playoff series. Like, they were right in it up to the end. So you're real close. You're real close. And you're always tying your franchise to the health of your superstar players. So yes, it is troubling that Kawhi has had these nagging issues, and you really don't know if he's ever going to be fully healthy, or this is going to be a guy that is a ticking time bomb every single season, and you don't know if you'll get him for more than 50 games. There's certainly been plenty of players throughout NBA history who hit a certain part of their career, or maybe their entire career, were that guy. Not many of them won championships, but they still earn big contracts in the faith of their franchises for a good reason. So I just feel like the die was already cast. You did so much to get Kawhi in the door. You don't think twice about offering that contract, and you go to bed sleeping fine at night that he signed it. If it doesn't work out, the fault will be on Kawhi's body and fate for not being able to hold up, not because Kawhi or you did anything wrong in this mixture.
He averaged 25, 7, and 5 last season, which was his second with the Clippers. But how do you financially? I think this is sort of interesting to pay attention to. It's just interesting. So if he had not opted out and become a free agent, his 4-year deal could have been worth $11 million more. Like he could have had $187 million as extension. Instead, he opted for free agent. But how about this? If he had stayed as a free agent, he could have signed an $82 million 2-year deal with the player option for after the second year, become the free agent again after that second year, after next year, and then he would have been eligible for a 5-year, $235 million max contract.
There's a couple of ways to interpret that. One could be that he truly was questioning whether he wanted to return and he wanted to test the market and have those meetings, but we haven't heard of, any rumors of other teams that he actually like seriously met with. Maybe his agent did a little bit and there was the back channel, but usually you would hear something about it. It didn't sound like there was much conversation there. And this was not a big free agent year as far as the names, and especially as far as the cap flexibility was going. You didn't have a lot of other teams that were like positioned this year to add someone like a Kawhi Leonard and contend for a championship. We're not going to get many of those years coming up, by the way. So that's a little bit odd if you go that route of, he wanted to kick the tires. Maybe he actually did this in order to save the Clippers some money. Now, most guys and most agents, when that happens, they make sure to feed that to the media to go, hey, remember, this guy, good team player, I took less money.
Right.
Kawhi didn't do that. Now, Kawhi never talks to anyone, so maybe that's not surprising.
Well, think about his team. His teammate Paul George signed a huge deal in December. Mm-hmm. It was like 4 years, and I just looked it up before, $190 million. Which, by the way, Paul George is averaging $47.5 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about going down the pecking order, like there's a few names before you get to Paul George and $47.5 million a year. But again, process a part of all the money that's being influxed into the NBA. And someone, again, Paul George, who is a very good player. Like, no one's going to say he's not a good player and worth a whole bunch of money. It's just,
maybe
he's
not quite that much.
He's not worth Dennis Schroeder money. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say.
I would be more comfortable giving Kawhi that check than Paul George, but Paul George has been healthier than Kawhi. Let's be real about that too. So
you got the health versus the disappearance in the playoffs at times, but was better this year at it for Paul George.
Absolutely.
Was much better. And Kawhi, when he was in the playoffs, was playing out of his mind. He was averaging like 30 points a game or something while he was playing. So
it's entirely possible.
Two fine guys to build around and to sort of try to make a team around. Sure.
Especially if they're getting along well enough. That's the big thing. If Kawhi is going, look, I don't care if I save you guys some money, and I really don't care if Paul George is paid more than me. Like, there are some benefits to Kawhi's quietness. Like, there's some amount of I don't care and even humility in Kawhi that he has shown time and time again, even with some of the enigmatic stuff where, like, dude's a blank slate. I don't know if he's actually here because he wants to be, or if he just wants to play basketball and incinerate people, because clearly he wants to do that.
He's he wants to show up because he showed up, and that's all.
He's the only guy who like plays his tail off in the All-Star game, like every single year. He will make defensive plays in the All-Star game. So maybe we're never going to know unless his agent starts talking. And if his agent started talking, he probably would get fired and not be his agent anymore. So, and I think, and this I may be way off. I think his agent is like his uncle or his dad or something like that too. I think it's a family member. So, I mean, the circle is tight in that player group, that brand group, if you want to look at it that way. I'm guessing you're Googling that right now.
I am looking to see because a lot of these stories are just like, hey, hold on, see, I'm finding that. I'm going to the real GM. Kawhi Leonard representing Impact Sports Management. His agent's Mitch Frankel.
Okay.
Who
so I may be wrong there.
Well, here's who he represents: Kawhi Leonard, Glenn Rice,
the third,
Dwayne Collins, Sylvester Shea, and Roscoe Smith.
Okay.
One of those guys is on a roster. No, Dwayne Collins. Sorry, Dwayne Collins is he on the Phoenix roster?
I don't think so. I mean, Glenn Robinson the third is usually on a roster or two every year, but
no, he's not. He's not. He was just drafted, he was first picked up by Miami. So yeah. Anyway, so Kawhi, secretive and rich now, by the way. So. All right, well, that'll do it. Joel and I talk a little bit more, and we're not quite as rich as Kawhi, but we're close. Joel, you want to say goodbye before we go to our mansion in Malibu?
Yeah, if anyone wants to offer me an $84 million contract, I'm not going to be irrationally confident. I will sign it for you. I'll be very respectful and sign that contract for you. Just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm gonna test free agency. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna see what's out there.
So Arky Shea is both a rhythm guy and an irrational confidence guy.
That's right. I'm hoping to sign for like a couple sandwiches, sub sandwiches, practically. I mean, to be honest, I'll get more food for me. But,
do you have a go-to sub sandwich, like the one that is money every time, the thing that you order almost like unconsciously if you get a sub?
No, because I like to build my own.
All right.
Yeah, I'm much like I used to really like meatball subs.
Mm-hmm.
But then like no one ever gets like the meatball to meat sauce ratio right, and then my bun's all soggy and like, bleh, give me the meatballs, bro. So
that's why I don't eat those. I'm not a fan of soggy bread whatsoever. I cannot handle that.
I don't mind soft. I just don't like soggy, bro. I'm just like me, right? You don't like a little softness. Hopefully I won't get you too soggy.
That's a different show, folks. I'm an Italian BMT guy. Give me all the BMTs. Doesn't matter who's making it.
Sounds like there's some vegetables in that, and that's a no-no.
Yeah, there are some vegetables. I don't mind a little bit of that. All right, that is episode 72. Everybody, the Jason Capono episode is in the books, and of course,
I forgot that's who this was.
If you want to watch us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, find us. You can search us Basketball by Association or BbA, and of course, Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. That's where you get us. We will be back presumably next Sunday.
And as always, be a Kawhi, not a Schroeder.